bed.
Hey guys, welcome to the Nerd Citadel. This is Chris M here. I'm going solo today, just due to our schedules, because the topic we're talking about today. Nick, unfortunately, doesn't have a whole lot to go off of. So here I am. With everything going on right now in the world, we're going to do a few nostalgia videos about our top 5 movies from various categories over the next few weeks. The categories that we're going to go through are, today's going to be slasher films, not completely solo, as you might see in the back corner. Ollie is here, keeping me company. But today, as I said, I'm going to talk to you about slasher films. My top 5 slasher films in no particular order of the 90s. So one film that I really, really love, because I think it's the first kind of meta horror film in that, well, it exists in what would be our world, and it's about his movie series and him being, I think it was like a demon inspired by that character, and that character is Freddy Krueger, as shown in Wes Craven's A New Nightmare, which I think is one of the best in the Nightmare on Elm Street series. I know there isn't a whole lot of love out there for it, but like I said, it just is a really meta take where the actors from the series are actually characters in the movie, and they're being hunted by this, I guess, boogeyman that has taken on the form of Freddy Krueger. Another one, which I guess I kind of like for a similar reason, though it's not exactly meta, is Candyman. And what I mean by that is Candyman, in another way, I think is kind of set in our world, in that it, you know, when you're little, it's a very common game, whether it be Bloody Mary or whatever other evil entity you're trying to summon, to look in the mirror, say their name 3 times, and see what happens. And I like that Candyman kind of builds off of that mythos, while at the same being kind of, I think, a more intelligent slasher, in that it's kind of a commentary on social justice and discrimination. And Candyman, I think, is actually a pretty scary movie. I think especially if you're older and you feel like either you yourself or know of people from history, rather, who can relate to what this guy had to deal with and why he is the way he is. Kind of a more empathetic villain in a slasher. Another kind of meta movie is Scream. I really like that Scream kind of is built around the rules of a slasher movie, like the whole idea of like the final girl who's expected to die in a slasher, and kind of built off of those tropes. And one of the guys that survives the first movie survives because of his knowledge of slasher films. I do also like that this is one of the movies where it turns out that there's actually 2 killers, so that kind of makes things a little more interesting, because you see at different points in the movie you actually see the 2 people who turn out to be the killers with the slasher. And if you're not assuming that it's going to be 2 killers under the mask of Ghostface, then that can make it harder to figure out, you know, at least on your first watch, who the actual killer is. Makes things a little more interesting. Scream also kind of skirted your expectations a little more, and then they actually eventually played with the idea. It was almost doubly meta, because not only was it based around what a slasher movie is, but they end up making movies in the series about the incidents based around other slasher movies, and then the new killings become inspired. I think in some of them even become inspired by those movies. Triple meta, if that's a thing. Pumpkinhead, Blood Wings. I really like supernatural in my slasher movies. I like the idea that it's not just a guy that you can, if you get lucky, take out. Some of these movies you wonder why, it's especially when there's big groups of people, how they're not able to either get away or subdue the killer more quickly. So it makes things a little more interesting when it's a very supernatural killer, as in Pumpkinhead 2, Blood Wings. I think the original movie was in like 88 or 89, Pumpkinhead, but what I like about Blood Wings, well, this is about the child of the original Pumpkinhead, and he ends up going after I think the original people who wronged him, as well as their children, if I remember that correctly. You had this demonic killer going around, and I always liked pumpkin motifs when I was little. I don't know why. The jack-o'-lanterns were just always kind of cool to me. So the idea that this demonic creature was kind of cool looking. I loved the old rubber monster kind of villains. He's real big with the claws and very demonic facial features. Just really a cool looking villain. And again, a more empathetic villain. It's a child of the original Pumpkinhead, who's killed because of his appearance. And then he's later resurrected and comes back to take his vengeance on the kids who are now grown up that chased him down and bludgeoned him to death. And I think they threw him down like a mine shaft or something. But the final movie I'm going to mention is Jason Goes to Hell. Now, I think this was after the rights of Jason were sold. So we got Jason Goes to Hell the final Friday, which for a while would be our last Friday the 13th movie, but would also lead into the eventual Freddy versus Jason, which I always thought was kind of a fun movie because you're pitting two slashers against each other. But Jason Goes to Hell, I think some of the earlier movies may have gone a little bit on the supernatural side, but this one really drives it home and actually doesn't just tie together Freddy with Jason, but also, if you read comics, or if you read this comic, you'll know that there was a Freddy versus Jason versus Ash comic, and the Necronomicon actually appears in the movie, complete with the cover made of flesh from a human face. Apparently, at some point, Jason's mother resurrected him, and he may or may not technically be a Deadite. And yeah, in the previous movie, he gets, or sometime between the two movies, he gets blown up. He's in pieces. They bring his body to the morgue, and he takes over the coroner and forces the coroner to eat his heart and takes possession of him. There's a lot of different demonic motifs in this movie. And just leans very heavily on the idea that Jason's now like a zombie or a demon or whatever you want to call it. But then at the end of the movie, a dog digs up his mask, I think, and Freddy's hand, as it starts to play the Nightmare on Elm Street music, comes up through the ground and grabs the mask and pulls it into hell. Yeah, so those are my top 5 slasher films of the 90s. Hope you'd enjoyed it. Like I said, next time, not sure the order we're going to do these in. Next time we'll either do horror, basically anything that wouldn't really fall into slasher category, action, or in my case, a lot of the action movies I like, I guess are technically action fantasy. So we'll talk a little bit about those, and then we will talk about sci-fi and comic book films. There's definitely going to be a few movies that could easily fall into more than one of these categories, so I will try my best to put them where they belong, or if I have some overflow, I might just cheat a little bit and throw them in another category that they kind of fit into. So I will, you'll see what I decide to do there. But until next time, stay nerdy.